Eustace is the president and CEO of the Child Abuse Prevention Center here in Sacramento. The mission of CAPC is to prevent child abuse and neglect through a spectrum of prevention at the local, statewide, and national levels. Janae was previously the executive director of California Youth Connection. She has worked for the County Welfare Directors Association, CWDA. I always call it CWDA. And as the Quality Parenting Initiative champion and youth engagement lead at the Youth Law Center. So Janae has been everywhere. Most of you here have met her in some capacity. When she was at Sacramento County Child Protective Services social worker, she advocated to establish the Sacramento State University's Guardian Scholars Program, which continues to serve assistance-impacted parents, families, and youth today. She first became involved with prevention and systems transformation work during her time in the foster care system. One of the many accomplishments Janae is proud of is helping execute the California Fostering Connections to Success Act nationally and implementation across the state of California. Janae is committed to ensuring the integrity of prevention frameworks that are fundamentally rooted in diversity with a community-led partnership. She graduated from Sacramento State University, where she received her bachelor's and master's degrees in social work. Janae is also an immensely proud wife, mother to 3 amazing boys, sister, chosen sister, godmom, and auntie. Welcome, Janae. Justice Shama Mesiwala is a native Californian whose family immigrated from Mumbai, India in the 1960s. After graduating law school, she was a lawyer for indigent criminal defendants. Justice Mesiwala then transitioned to working for the judiciary. She was a chambers attorney for Justice Ron Roby for 11 years. Then she spent 6 years on the trial court, first as a commissioner and then as a judge. She presided over a dependency courtroom for 4 years, including creating the first Indian Child Welfare Act courtroom in Northern California. On Valentine's Day 2023, she was confirmed to the 3rd District Court of Appeal, having been rated exceptionally well qualified. She is the first South Asian female justice and first Muslim female justice on any California appellate court. Justice Mesiwala is active in the community. She's a professor of appellate advocacy at her alma mater, UC Davis Law School. She's president of the Schwartz Levy Inn of Court and is co-founder of the South Asian Bar Association of Sacramento. Justice Mesiwala lives in Yolo County with her spouse of 21 years and their lively son. Welcome to both of you. Okay, well, we're just going to get right into it. I'd like to start with you, Justice Mesiwala. Take us to a typical morning in your old Department 133. What was that like?
Hi, Brenda. So first of all, I just want to look out in the audience. You all look beautiful and wonderful. I recognize so many of you, and it's just a joy and a pleasure to be here. And Janae, it's wonderful to meet you in person. We've had a number of Zoom conversations, and it's so nice to be seated next to you at our table and here. So most of you, I think, have been in a dependency courtroom. I had dependency courtroom 133. And a day in Department 133 doesn't really start at 8:30. It starts much earlier, probably about 6 o'clock. For all of you who have been in dependency, we have stacks of reading. A lot of it comes the night before or the morning of, not because our social workers aren't doing their job. It's because being a social worker is a 24/7 job, and that means writing reports around the clock. And to get the information you need to the bench and to all the lawyers in the courtrooms, that often means writing reports the night before, and so we get them in on our desks off in the morning of. So starts probably at 6 o'clock reading the reports that we're catching up on, and then we started at 8:30 and we triaged the cases. And if we were lucky, we would go on the record by about 9:30. The courtroom was packed, probably with about, I'd say, 10 to 15 lawyers. And then we'd start and we'd call the first case, and the parents would be there. And there's a hallway where the youth would enter, and there are very strong lights that come down. And it was like a runway. And I'm thinking back on it, I'm kind of getting emotional because these youth would walk down, and they were in varying ages, right? They had to be old enough to be able to walk by themselves. Sometimes they were escorted. And I always had to decide, do I look at them? Do I look away? How do I greet them? And it was different based on each youth. Some of them would look directly at me, and I would look directly at them and smile, so they were welcome. Some of them you could tell they didn't want to be acknowledged in that way, so you knew not to acknowledge them. And then they sat down. And they sat down by their lawyer, which is a powerful thing to say, that they have a lawyer in the courtroom. But I would say with every single child in the courtroom, I either could see my own child, I could see a niece or a nephew, I could see my neighbor's kid, I could see my friend's kid. There was always something in each of those children that resonated with me. And that is how a case began. So that would be a typical morning in dependency. We would do that 15 to 20 times. It was one of the best experiences of my life, but probably the hardest experience of my life.
Yeah, thank you for that. Janae, pulling on your experience in foster care systems, tell us about what that would feel like as a child.
Thank you. Well, definitely it felt like you weren't quite sure what you were walking into. So a lot of times you would know you had a court date, sometimes you would understand. I was a little older. I was about 13. So I did see my court report, and I was aware that there was a court report, but I was also aware of all these errors in the court report. Little things to everyone else, but really big things for me. So for me, it was walking into a space where I felt like they didn't know me, and they already had some of the wrong story. So I did feel defensive walking into the courtroom. I was also met with, I remember my first time meeting my children's attorney, who was not CLC back then, but I remember thinking, well, this is pretty quick. Like, I don't know if this person knew me. And I didn't know if that person would represent me, because I knew what court was, and I knew that you needed a lawyer to represent you, but I wasn't quite sure if they were going to represent me wholly and fully. But then I remembered, or I was reminded, that the social worker investigator who'd come over earlier and met with me worked with the attorney. So I remembered when they mentioned her name, I remembered who she was. And I don't think she was a social worker investigator back then, maybe it was a different name, but she did work with the attorneys. And I remember that I was like, okay, well, I did meet her, she was really nice, and she told me about my rights. And that's how I knew to come to court on the defense, because I knew I had something going for me. But it was really overwhelming. I knew that I could see my mom. Which even still can't help but fill you with emotion, because at that time, there was literally an order that you weren't able to see your parents without some type of supervision. So being old enough to know and understand that was really overwhelming.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really important as a child that we focus on how all the things that we are rushing about to do impacts young people's lives and can stick with them for many years later. Janae, we heard Lola talk about in the video about her role as a peer advocate while she's at CLC here. Please, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the role of the peer advocate and how having one can really help a lawyer to represent a child in a holistic way.
Yes. So that's one of my favorite work of CLC, and it's the extras. And the extras are just so vitally important because when you are a young person and you're feeling all of these emotions and you're this is your life, right? It's happening right before your eyes, it's playing out. It feels so good to know that there are others who have experienced that. And I found that community in the California Youth Connection, but I also found that community when I was actually working for the former firm that was supporting youth here in Sacramento County. It was the Sacramento Child Advocates. And when I was in that role as a social worker investigator, I was able to work alongside the peer advocates. And one thing about those peer advocates is that they understand what's happening. They know what you're going through. It feels good to be able to say, oh, it is kind of weird, like when a social worker comes to your school, huh? Or how did you feel when you read that court report? Or did you react the same way? It also felt good to humanize the attorneys because for us, these are attorneys. They're like people who talk to judges, and there are folks who, who know everything. Like I didn't think there was one thing my attorney didn't know. So it was nice to hear the human side from the peer advocates, where they were able to say like, "Oh no, she's really nice. Like I know you didn't meet her yet, or he's really nice, and you'll get a chance." But that advocacy goes such a long way. All of us can look around, maybe we're at the table right now with someone that we know, and you just automatically feel comfortable, you feel connected. So to be able to meet with a young person who's also experiencing what I was experiencing, it meant everything. And even as a social worker investigator myself, being able to lean in where the young folks were like, okay, I get that you said you were in foster care, but you don't look that young anymore. So I don't know if I can trust what you're saying, but I feel like I can trust what she's saying because I like her too, so she knows something. So it's about engagement. It's about being able to relate and have that relationship, and that goes so much further than what we all think. So these extras matter so much.
Thank you. Justice Manuel, I remember we were talking a while ago and you mentioned something about the power of why. When a child uses the term my judge, my social worker, my attorney. Talk a little bit about what that means when you hear a young child say my.
Yeah, I think the first time was when I heard a child say, "You're my judge." And I remember kind of standing up in my chair straighter, and I thought to myself, I am your judge. I'm your judge, I'm your parents' judge, I'm the social worker's judge, I'm everybody's judge that is in this courtroom, right? And it's that connection is you want the children to feel like the person sitting next to them is their attorney, it's their advocate, it's the person that is speaking for them when they can't speak for themselves. Some youth do speak for themselves, and when they do, that's very powerful, but it's equally as powerful when your attorney can speak on your behalf. And it was impactful when parents believed that I was their judge too, because it meant that I could equally look at a case and see it from the parent's perspective, but the parents also understood that I wasn't just there for them. I was there for their children, I was there for the social worker, I was there for everybody in the system. And I'd never heard anybody call me their judge, and I think I thought about the cases differently when I heard that for the first time, and I take it as a great honor that a child would think of me as their judge.
Well, one of the things that we talked about earlier in our introduction was that you started the first Indian Child Welfare Act court. Talk about why that is important and what kind of work goes on in that courtroom.
So first tell you how we started it here in Sacramento. So a number of us that are in this room went to a training that was put on, I can't remember if it was put on by Judicial Council or by the tribes, that I think all of the tribes who appear in our courtrooms were represented, and I naively thought I was doing a pretty good job. Yes, that laughter, I hear that. And one by one, these tribes got up and said, essentially, you are all not doing a good job. And I was taken aback, one, at the honesty. I appreciated the honesty because as judges, sometimes we don't hear the truth. And two, I leaned in and I listened very carefully, right? I mean, I think we spend so much time, and everybody in this courtroom this room will understand, we spend so much time making sure noticing is done right, and that we haven't missed out on letting a tribe know that possibly this is an Indian child, that when a child is in our care and is an Indian child, that we don't necessarily give them the services that they are due, not just under the law, but that we should provide as a society. So I decided, in the way that I am, I was just going to go up to my presiding judge right then and there and say, can we start an ICWA courtroom? I had no idea what an ICWA courtroom entailed, but I thought it was a really good idea. And I will tell you this, it was Geraldine Borak at the time, and there are two things that I have to mention with how this came into being. Actually, three probably. Geraldine Borak comes from a family of Holocaust survivors, and I'm absolutely certain that she understood in a most visceral and profound way what the annihilation of Native American families and children did to the community, because her ancestors were annihilated, right? So she didn't hesitate, and she said, I'm good with it. I mean, this is happening at a break, okay? We have no planning, there's no meeting, there's no anything. And she said, but you're gonna have to clear it with Halm, Russ Halm. Halm was the presiding judge of the entire Sacramento Superior Court. So I said, well, what do? She said, I don't know, email him. And so the thing you need to know about Russ Halm is he is of Japanese descent, okay? And so I emailed him, and Halm said, as long as Judge Borak says it's okay with me. But I think what's important about that connection with Judge Halm is he comes from a lineage of people who were interned by this country, right? So he profoundly understands the abuse that systems can perpetrate on their own people. So you had two judges in positions of power who understood what the state can do in the most horrific way to people in their communities. So that's how we started. And then the third component that I think is absolutely worth mentioning, and I give it up to Sacramento because it is so important, we couldn't have done this without the department, right? We can only do so much as the court. We need the buy-in of the department who's filing these cases, right? And I needed them filed directly in my department. And I think Judge Borak called up, I can't remember who it was at the time, Melissa, maybe you know. Where's Melissa? Where's Melissa? Melissa somewhere. Melissa may know. Michelle, you may know. She called somebody at CPS, and they said, yes, we will direct file in 133. And it wasn't a months-long discussion, it wasn't a years-long discussion, it was done essentially over a couple weeks. And so that's how we started in Sacramento. And why is it so important? It's because this idea that, as you all know in the law, we have to give active efforts to children who are Native American. Frankly, we should give active efforts to every child in the dependency system. I could say I didn't know what active efforts looked like. Why? Honestly, it's because I was focused so much on the noticing, and I think so many of us in this room are so focused on that when we find out that our youth are Native, we didn't necessarily take the care to give them those active efforts. So the department hired a social worker that was Native American. It made a huge difference, and people became experts in this area of law. That's why I think it was important, and I have to point out that it was the collaboration and teamwork of everybody in the system that allowed it to happen, and I don't know that it could be formed so quickly anywhere but Sacramento.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you. Janae, what would you like to leave people in this room with tonight?
Definitely the power of engagement and the power of really having the time and space and to do the extras. Because CLC is very special because you're able to have that multidisciplinary team that's able to really be responsive. I mean, I worked with young people for so many years, and I remember there was a young woman who was just at the brink of being done. She'd been in the system for so long, and she didn't understand why she was not a part of extension of foster care. Like, why am I not a part of AB 12? Like, I should be. And literally, I sent a message on Facebook to Cindy was like maybe 7 o'clock at night. And I sent that message on Facebook because I didn't have Cindy's number, but I had her on Facebook from years of work. And so I wrote Cindy and I said, listen, this young woman is down right now, down bad, really needs some support, is ready to just give up. And she just needs more answers. And I know maybe you don't have the answer, but I think you might be able to connect her. So let's see what we can do. And literally by the next day, the young woman was writing me back saying that Cindy had contacted her. And she just had an energy about her. She had hope. And that's why the extras matter. It doesn't take one attorney. It's not one amazing Anne. There's so much to the multidisciplinary team. So I just have to say that the extras matter. And we should not have to make sure that the extras are available because of caseload, because caseload is moving us in the right direction, right? But the extras are necessary and they have to be here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your insights tonight and your amazing background. Let's give another round of applause to our speakers.